Winter has always been dangerous indoors, not because of the cold alone, but because of what happens when cold air is shut out completely. Long before antibiotics, humidifiers, and modern HVAC systems, families understood a simple winter ventilation rule that quietly protected them from chronic coughs, chest infections, and lingering winter illnesses. It wasn't written in medical textbooks, but it was practiced faithfully in farmhouses, tenements, frontier cabins, and military quarters. That rule was controlled daily air exchange, even in the dead of winter, and it was treated as essential as food or firewood. This wasn't about comfort, it was about survival. Homes that followed this rule saw fewer lingering coughs, less winter chest, and far lower rates of mold-driven illness. Homes that ignored it often became sick houses, places where coughs never quite went away and winter weakness lingered until spring. The rule was simple. No living space was allowed to remain sealed for a full day. Historical building manuals from the 18th and 19th centuries, along with household guides and military engineering notes, consistently reflect the same principle. Every occupied space had to exchange air daily, regardless of temperature. This did not mean throwing windows wide open for hours. It meant brief, deliberate ventilation periods designed to flush stale air without losing stored heat. Families, would crack upper windows for just a few minutes at a time, usually up near the ceiling where all that warm, moisture-laden air liked to collect. Some folks opened up windows on opposite sides of the room just a bit, creating a slow cross-draft, and then they'd shut them once the fresh air had replaced the old. In colder regions, this was something folks did once in the morning and then again before bed. The duration was short, but, the consistency really mattered. What really mattered most was making sure no room stayed sealed up long enough for moisture, smoke residue, and human breath to build up past safe levels. Even poorer homes, honestly, followed this same logic. In crowded urban housing, windows were small but still could be opened, and daily airing was expected, even if it was cold outside. Hospital wards, military barracks, and boarding houses all stuck to strict airing schedules, since folks in charge noticed that coughs and respiratory illness spread a whole lot faster in sealed-up quarters. The understanding folks had back then was practical, not really theoretical. When air stopped moving, people just got sick. Smoke from fireplaces, oil lamps, and those early stoves would just linger in sealed-up rooms. Moisture from cooking, washing, and even breathing would condense right on those cold walls. Mold quietly formed behind furniture and up in the ceiling corners. And without any ventilation, these conditions, they just stuck around for months. Families who aired out their homes on a regular basis, they saw coughs just kind of fade away. But those who didn't, they often figured illness was just part of winter life. The rule emphasized short, intense air changes rather than constant exposure. This is where modern misunderstandings creep in. Historical ventilation was not about keeping windows open all day. It was about replacing the entire air volume of a room quickly, then sealing it again. Cold air is dense and dry. When introduced briefly, it pushes warm, stale air upward and out. Once windows are closed, retained heat quickly warms the new air without excessive fuel loss. This method, it preserved both health and firewood. Many families timed ventilation around stove tending. Windows were cracked just after feeding the fire, allowing fresh air to enter as the stove output increased. This synchronized heat production with air exchange. Sleeping spaces were treated differently than living spaces. Bedrooms received special attention. Even in extreme cold, upper sashes were often opened slightly overnight or aired thoroughly before sleep. The belief was clear. Breathing stale air for 8 hours was more dangerous than cold air for 10 minutes. Military winter quarters followed the same rule. Barracks ventilation was mandatory because commanders observed that respiratory illness weakened troops faster than cold exposure. Applying this rule today requires undoing modern sealing habits. Modern homes are far more airtight than historical ones. Weather stripping, foam insulation, sealed windows, and tight doors trap air efficiently. That's good for energy bills, but honestly, it can be dangerous if ventilation is ignored. Applying the old rule today means deliberately venting your home even in winter. Choose 2 times daily. Crack a window or 2 on opposite sides of the house for 5 to 10 minutes. Focus on upper levels where warm air collects. Close them once the air feels refreshed, not cold. If you heat with a stove or fireplace, coordinate ventilation right after fueling. If you use central heating, ventilate just before heating cycles begin. Bathrooms and kitchens should be aired immediately after use to prevent moisture accumulation. Now, sleeping rooms deserve special care. It's important to air them fully before bed, even if you end up closing the windows overnight. You know, this single habit often reduces lingering coughs dramatically. The health benefit really came from moisture control just as much as fresh oxygen. Folks back then didn't use our modern terms, but they understood that damp air was dangerous. Moisture-fed mold made lung irritation worse, and honestly, made cold air feel even harsher. Ventilation expelled moisture before it had a chance to condense. Dry winter air coming into the home actually reduced indoor dampness. That's why aired homes felt warmer and healthier, even when the temperatures outside were colder. Modern humidifiers, well, they often make the problem worse if you use them without good ventilation. Historical practice relied on controlled dryness, not artificial moisture, to keep the air healthy. This rule mattered most during long winters when homes stayed closed for months. The longer a home remained sealed, the more harmful buildup occurred. Winter wasn't dangerous because of cold, but because people lived indoors continuously. By breaking that stagnation daily, families reset their indoor environment. This is why the rule was treated as non-negotiable, not optional. Even during blizzards, ventilation occurred briefly during calm periods. The commitment was absolute. This knowledge remains relevant for preparedness and long-term resilience. In grid-down scenarios during fuel shortages or in prolonged winter confinement, ventilation discipline becomes critical again. Sick houses, well, they weaken families faster than cold does. Understanding this rule allows you to design winter routines that protect health without wasting fuel. It also helps you recognize when modern comfort practices are quietly undermining resilience. This is not nostalgia. It is field-tested survival knowledge refined over centuries. If you value forgotten knowledge that actually kept families alive, you're in the right place. Warfield Prepper Chronicles exist to preserve the practices history proved, not the theories modern systems assume. Subscribe to the channel for more deep-cut historical survival knowledge and share this with anyone who thinks sealing a house tighter is always better. Some of the most effective survival rules were quiet, simple, and nearly lost.